Today, we are going to study one of the greatest literary critics of the classical age, Horace. Our topic is Horace's criticism, and by the end of this lesson, you will clearly understand who Horace was, what he believed about literature, why his ideas became so influential, and how his theories continue to shape literature even today. Before we begin his theories, let us first understand something very important. Imagine you want to become a good cricketer. Would you only play matches without learning the rules? No, you first learn the rules, understand the techniques, watch experienced players, and then improve your own game. Literature works in the same way. A poet or writer may have imagination and talent, but without understanding the principles of good writing, the work may become confusing or ineffective. This is exactly where literary criticism becomes important. Literary criticism teaches us how literature should be written, appreciated, and evaluated. Among the earliest and most influential literary critics, three names are always remembered. The first is Plato, who questioned poetry because he believed it could mislead people. The second is Aristotle, who defended poetry and explained how it creates emotional purification through tragedy. The third is Horace, who shifted the discussion from, "What is poetry?" to, "How should a poet write well?" This is why Horace is often called the practical teacher of poets. Instead of discussing abstract philosophy, Horace gave practical advice that writers could immediately apply in their work. Think of Plato as someone asking whether literature is good for society. Think of Aristotle as someone explaining how literature works. Think of Horace as the experienced teacher showing writers how to write excellent literature. That is why Horace became one of the greatest guides for poets. Now let us know a little about Horace himself. Horace was a Roman poet and literary critic. He lived during the reign of Emperor Augustus, a period often called the Golden Age of Roman literature. This was an age of peace, stability, and great cultural development. Horace was not only a poet but also an observer of human nature. He believed that good literature should not only entertain people but should also make them wiser and morally better. One of his most famous works is Ars Poetica, which means the art of poetry. Although it is written as a poem, it is actually a handbook for poets. In this work, Horace explains how writers should choose their subjects, organize their ideas, maintain unity, create believable characters, and write in a style suitable for their audience. Many of the rules we still discuss in literary criticism have their roots in this book. As we move through this presentation, we will not simply memorize Horace's ideas. We will understand them with simple explanations, everyday examples, comparisons, and important examination points. Even if you have never studied literary criticism before, do not worry. We will build every concept step by step, beginning from the basics and moving towards the advanced ideas. By the end of this presentation, Horace's criticism will no longer seem difficult. Instead, it will become one of the easiest and most interesting topics in literary criticism. So, let us begin our journey into the fascinating world of Horace and discover why his ideas have remained important for more than 2,000 years. Now that we have a basic idea of why Horace is important, let us get to know the man himself. Whenever we study a literary critic, one question is always important. Who was this person? Where did he come from? What kind of life did he live? Because a person's experiences often shape his ideas. The same is true for Horace. Let us begin with his full name. Horace's full name was Quintus Horatius Flaccus. Horace is simply the shorter name by which he is known throughout the world. In examinations, if you see either Horace or Quintus Horatius Flaccus, remember that both refer to the same person. Now look at his lifespan. He lived from 65 BC to 8 BC. Notice that both dates are before the birth of Jesus Christ. This means Horace lived more than 2,000 years ago, during the final years of the Roman Republic and the beginning of the Roman Empire. Despite living so long ago, his ideas are still studied in universities across the world. That tells us how powerful and timeless his literary theories are. Next, let us see where he was born. Horace was born in Venusia, a town in southern Italy. At that time, Italy was part of the Roman Republic. The Roman Republic was one of the greatest civilizations in history. It valued education, law, public speaking, philosophy, literature, and military strength. Horace grew up in this rich intellectual environment, which greatly influenced his thinking. Now comes one of the most inspiring parts of his life. Look at the next point. His father was a freedman. What does the word freedman mean? A freedman was a person who had once been a slave but later gained his freedom. Think about this carefully. Horace did not come from a wealthy royal family. He did not belong to the highest class of society. His father had experienced slavery. Yet, his father believed that education was the greatest gift he could give his son. Instead of spending money on luxury, he invested everything in Horace's education. This teaches us a beautiful lesson. A person's success does not depend only on family background. It depends on education, hard work, discipline, and determination. Horace himself appreciated his father's sacrifices throughout his life. Now let us see where Horace studied. His father sent him to Rome, the greatest educational center of the Roman world. There, Horace studied grammar, literature, philosophy, and rhetoric. But his education did not stop there. Later, he went to Athens in Greece. Why is Athens important? Because Athens was considered the greatest center of learning in the ancient world. Many famous philosophers, including Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, had lived or taught there. Imagine a student today going to the world's best universities to study under famous professors. That was exactly what Athens represented in Horace's time. By studying in both Rome and Athens, Horace gained knowledge of both Roman and Greek literature. This combination later made him one of the finest literary critics in history. Now let us understand his role. Horace was not only one thing. He had several important identities. First, he was a lyric poet. A lyric poet writes poems that express personal thoughts and emotions. For example, if someone writes a poem about friendship, happiness, love, or the beauty of nature, that is called lyric poetry. Second, Horace was a satirist. What is satire? Satire is a style of writing that gently criticizes people's mistakes, foolish behavior, or social problems, often using humor. For example, suppose someone writes a funny story about people spending 10 hours every day on their mobile phones without talking to their own family. People laugh while reading it, but at the same time they realize the problem. That is satire. Horace became famous for writing such poems. However, he did not attack people with anger. His satire was usually gentle, balanced, and intended to improve society rather than insult it. Finally, Horace became one of the greatest literary critics. This is the role for which he is remembered most today. He carefully studied poetry and explained what makes a poem beautiful, effective, meaningful, and enjoyable. Instead of simply saying, "This poem is good," Horace explained why it is good and how poets could improve their writing. That is why his book Ars Poetica, or The Art of Poetry, became one of the most influential books in literary criticism. Before we move to the next slide, let us quickly revise. Horace's full name was Quintus Horatius Flaccus. He lived from 65 BC to 8 BC. He was born in Venusia in the Roman Republic. He was the son of a freedman whose greatest gift was education. He studied in Rome and Athens, receiving an excellent education in literature and philosophy. And finally, Horace became famous as a lyric poet, satirist, and above all, one of the greatest literary critics in world literature. In the next slide, we will explore the historical world in which Horace lived and understand how that period shaped his literary ideas. Now that we know who Horace was, the next question is very important. Why did Horace think the way he did? To answer that question, we must understand the world in which he lived. A person's ideas are always influenced by the society around them. Similarly, Horace's literary criticism was shaped by the historical period known as the Augustan Golden Age. This period is one of the most important ages in Roman history and also one of the most important periods in the history of literature. Let us understand this step by step. The situation before 31 BC. Look at the first point on the slide. It says pre-31 BC. Before 31 BC, Rome was not peaceful. Instead, it was suffering from a series of civil wars. Now, what is a civil war? A civil war is a war fought between people of the same country. Instead of fighting another nation, Romans were fighting Romans. There were struggles for political power. Many famous leaders, including Julius Caesar, Pompey, Mark Antony, and Octavian, were involved in these conflicts. Because of these wars, people lived in fear. Trade became difficult, economic conditions became unstable, education and literature also suffered. Think of a school where students are constantly fighting. Can teachers conduct peaceful classes? Can students concentrate on learning? Of course not. In the same way, when a country is full of conflict, literature cannot flourish. Writers become more concerned with survival than with creativity. Therefore, before 31 BC, Rome did not have the stable environment needed for great literary achievements. What happened in 31 BC? Now look at the second stage. It says 31 BC to AD 14. This period begins with one of the most important events in Roman history. In 31 BC, Octavian defeated Mark Antony and Cleopatra in the famous Battle of Actium. After this victory, Octavian became the undisputed ruler of Rome. Later, he received the title Augustus Caesar. Remember this name because it is very important. The word Augustan comes from Augustus. So, when we say Augustan age, we simply mean the period during which Emperor Augustus ruled Rome. His reign lasted from 31 BC to AD 14. Unlike the years before him, Augustus brought peace and political stability. This period is often called the Pax Romana, which means Roman peace. What does peace do for a society? Peace allows people to build schools. Peace encourages education. Peace supports art. Peace helps writers think creatively instead of worrying about war. Imagine two students. One studies in a noisy place filled with constant disturbances. Another studies in a peaceful library. Who is likely to perform better? Obviously, the second student. The same principle applies to nations. Peace creates an environment where literature and culture can grow. That is exactly what happened under Augustus. Literature blossomed during this age. Because of this peaceful atmosphere, Rome experienced a remarkable literary revival. Many great writers appeared during this period. Among them were Virgil, Ovid, Propertius, and Horace. These writers produced works that became classics of world literature. This is why historians call this period the Golden Age of Roman literature. Notice something interesting. Great literature rarely appears by accident. It often develops when a society enjoys peace, education, and cultural support. Augustus himself encouraged literature because he believed that good writing could strengthen Roman values and national pride. So, writers received respect, encouragement, and sometimes even financial support. This allowed them to devote themselves fully to writing. The cultural shift. Now let us move to the third point on the slide. It says cultural shift. What does this mean? Before this period, Greek literature was considered the highest standard of excellence. Greek writers such as Homer, Sophocles, Euripides, Plato, and Aristotle had already become legendary. Roman writers admired them greatly. But during the Augustan age, something changed. Roman writers no longer wanted to remain mere imitators. Instead, they wanted to prove that Rome could produce literature equal to, or even better than, that of Greece. This created a strong feeling of cultural confidence. Let me explain with a simple example. Imagine a college where students always believe another college is the best. One day, they decide, we will work hard and prove that our college can produce equally brilliant students. This determination motivates everyone to improve. That was exactly the spirit of Augustan Rome. Roman poets wanted to create masterpieces that future generations would admire. Horace strongly supported this goal. However, he also believed that greatness required discipline. Simply wishing to become great was not enough. Writers needed knowledge, practice, patience, and careful craftsmanship. The problem of inferior poets. Now let us examine the final point. The slide mentions the problem. What was this problem? During the peaceful Augustan age, many people started writing poetry. At first, this seems like good news. But there was one difficulty. Not everyone who wrote poetry possessed real talent or proper training. Many inexperienced writers produced poor quality poems. These writers were often called poetasters. Remember this examination term. A poetaster is a person who writes poetry but lacks true poetic ability or artistic excellence. Think of someone who buys a stethoscope and immediately claims to be a doctor. Can we accept that? Certainly not. A real doctor requires years of education and training. Similarly, Horace believed that writing poetry required learning, practice, discipline, and good judgment. Anyone could write lines that rhyme. But not everyone could create genuine literature. As poor quality poems became more common, readers found it difficult to distinguish good poetry from bad poetry. This created an important question. How can we judge whether a poem is truly good? This question became one of the main reasons why Horace wrote his famous work Ars Poetica. He wanted to establish practical principles that would guide poets toward excellence and help readers recognize quality literature. Why this slide is so important. Before we move on, let us connect everything together. Rome first experienced years of civil war and instability. Then Augustus established peace. Peace encouraged education and literature. Roman writers became ambitious enough to compete with the great Greek authors. However, the increase in writers also led to many inferior poems. Therefore, there arose a need for clear literary standards. Horace responded to this need by explaining how good literature should be written. This historical background is essential because it helps us understand that Horace's criticism did not appear suddenly. It was a practical response to the literary needs of his own age. In the next slide, we will begin exploring Horace's major works, especially the masterpiece that made him one of the greatest literary critics in history, Ars Poetica, or the art of poetry. Now that we understand the historical period in which Horace lived, let us go one step further. A person's ideas do not develop by accident. They are shaped by education, experience, philosophy, and observation. The same is true for Horace. If we want to understand his literary criticism, we must first understand the ideas that influenced his thinking. This slide shows us the foundation of Horace's thought. On the left side, we see the three philosophical traditions that influenced him. On the right side, we see the three major kinds of works he wrote. Together, these explain both what Horace believed and how he expressed those beliefs through literature. Let us study each one carefully. First foundation, Stoicism. Let us begin with Stoicism. Stoicism was one of the most influential philosophies in the ancient world. Its main message was very simple. A good person should live according to reason, perform duty, and exercise self-control. Now let us understand these three words. First, reason. Reason means thinking calmly before acting. Instead of allowing emotions to control us, we should allow wisdom and logic to guide our decisions. For example, imagine two students receive poor marks in an examination. One student becomes angry, blames the teacher, and stops studying. The other student calmly analyzes the mistakes, studies harder, and performs better next time. Which student is using reason? The second one. That is the Stoic approach. Second, duty. Duty means doing what is right, even when it is difficult. A teacher teaches honestly. A doctor treats patients sincerely. A student studies regularly. Each person performs his or her responsibility. Third, self-control. Self-control means controlling our anger, greed, fear, excitement, and desires. Instead of becoming a slave to our emotions, we become their master. Horace admired these values. That is why, throughout his literary criticism, he repeatedly advises writers to be disciplined. He believed that poetry should not be careless or uncontrolled. Just as a person's life should be balanced, a poem should also be balanced. Notice how philosophy begins to influence literature. A disciplined mind creates disciplined writing. Second foundation, Epicureanism. Now let us move to the second philosophy. This is Epicureanism. Many students misunderstand this philosophy. Some people think Epicureanism teaches us to enjoy unlimited pleasure. That is not true. Epicurus did not encourage luxury or excess. He taught that true happiness comes from moderation, inner peace, and simple pleasures. One famous expression connected with this philosophy is carpe diem. This is a Latin phrase. It means, seize the day. But what does that actually mean? Does it mean spending money carelessly or living irresponsibly? No. It means appreciating the present moment because life is uncertain. Let me give you a simple example. Suppose you keep postponing everything. I'll visit my parents next year. I'll thank my teacher later. I'll start studying next month. Sometimes, that opportunity never returns. Epicureanism reminds us to value today's opportunities. Study today. Love your family today. Help others today. Enjoy life's simple blessings today. Horace accepted this balanced view of life. Many of his poems encourage readers to enjoy simple pleasures such as friendship, nature, music, conversation, and peaceful living. He believed happiness does not come from unlimited wealth. It comes from contentment. This idea also influenced his literary criticism. Just as life should avoid excess, literature should also avoid unnecessary exaggeration. Good writing is balanced and moderate. Third foundation, skepticism. Now let us study the third influence. This is skepticism. The word skeptic simply means someone who asks questions instead of accepting everything without thinking. A skeptic does not reject every idea. Rather, a skeptic examines evidence carefully before believing something. For example, imagine someone says, "This is the greatest poem ever written." A skeptic immediately asks, what makes it the greatest? What evidence supports that opinion? What standards are we using to judge it? This habit of questioning develops critical thinking. Horace appreciated this attitude. He believed writers should observe human nature carefully instead of blindly following tradition. The slide also mentions that beauty is fleeting. What does fleeting mean? It means something that lasts only for a short time. Think about a rainbow. It appears beautifully in the sky. But after some time, it disappears. Or think about a beautiful flower. It blooms today but fades after a few days. Life itself is temporary. Youth is temporary. Beauty is temporary. This awareness made Horace value wisdom over outward appearance. It also encouraged him to write literature that remained meaningful beyond temporary fashions. Bringing the three philosophies together. Now let us combine these three philosophies. Stoicism taught Horace discipline. Epicureanism taught him moderation and contentment. Skepticism taught him careful observation and questioning. When these three ideas came together, they created Horace's balanced personality. He was neither too strict nor too carefree, neither too emotional nor too cold. He believed that good literature should reflect the same balance. This explains why Horace repeatedly advises poets to think carefully before writing. Horace's major literary works. Now let us move to the right side of the slide. Here we see three pillars. These pillars represent Horace's three major kinds of literary works. Each one reveals a different side of his genius. First pillar, odes. The first pillar is odes. An ode is a type of lyric poem. Horace's odes are famous for their beauty, musical quality, and thoughtful reflections on life. He wrote about many subjects: friendship, love, nature, time, old age, death, peace, the importance of living wisely. Notice something interesting. Even when Horace writes about ordinary experiences, he transforms them into universal lessons. For example, when he speaks about enjoying a peaceful evening with friends, he is actually teaching readers to value simple happiness rather than endless ambition. His odes are therefore not only beautiful poems but also lessons about living well. Second pillar, satires. The second pillar is satires. We have already learned that satire criticizes human weaknesses. But Horace's satire is different from harsh attacks. He does not insult people. He gently laughs at human foolishness. Suppose someone becomes proud because he has bought an expensive mobile phone. Horace would probably smile and write a humorous poem showing how temporary such pride really is. The reader laughs, but at the same time, the reader learns an important lesson. This is Horatian satire. Its purpose is correction, not humiliation. It teaches while entertaining. Third pillar, epistles. Now we come to the third pillar. These are the epistles. The word, epistle, simply means letter. Horace wrote letters in poetic form. Instead of writing ordinary letters, he wrote them in verse. These letters discuss friendship, philosophy, morality, and literature. One of these epistles became the most famous work of his life. It is called Ars Poetica, meaning the art of poetry. Although it is technically part of his epistles, it became an independent masterpiece of literary criticism. In this work, Horace explains how poets should write, revise, choose subjects, create characters, and achieve artistic excellence. Most of the literary principles we will study in the coming slides come directly from this remarkable work. Before we move ahead, let us quickly revise. Horace's thinking rested upon three great philosophical traditions. Stoicism taught him reason, duty, and self-control. Epicureanism taught him moderation, contentment, and the importance of enjoying life's simple pleasures. Skepticism taught him to question, observe, and think critically. These ideas shaped both his personality and his literary criticism. As a writer, Horace expressed these ideas through three major works. His odes celebrate life and friendship. His satires gently criticize human weaknesses. His epistles combine philosophy with practical advice, and among them stands the immortal Ars Poetica, the work that established Horace as one of the greatest literary critics in history. In the next slide, we will begin studying Ars Poetica itself and discover why this single work became the foundation of classical literary criticism for centuries.